Good evening, everyone. Juan Cotto touching bases with you from the Converge Media headquarters on your community radio station, Rainier Avenue Radio.world tonight. Councilmember Kshama Sawant. Her supporters call her a leader, an activist, a firebrand, an attractive member of a movement, a socialist movement. Her opponents call her polarizing. Her opponents call her controversial. Her opponents say that she has done some bad things. And Cindy Laws, welcome tonight. We are going to be here for the next 2 hours to discuss this campaign going on in District 3. At 8 o'clock, the results will come in. And between that time, we're going to hear from some of the most dynamic political consultants and community leaders in Seattle's history. So welcome to the show tonight.
Thank you very much, Juan. It's so great to be here again and Converge. Oh my gosh. What a great place, and Rainier Avenue Radio really putting it out there once again.
Rainier Avenue Radio, telling the stories of our community. And once again, this is a big story in the community, as many have called this one of the most important local elections in recent memory.
This is the first recall of a city council race in Seattle's history.
And just to lead into that, tonight we have some guests who are going to be able to speak to these points, both supporting Councilmember Sawant and also folks who have decided to make the decision to vote against Councilmember Sawant. Tonight at 7:30, we are going to have former King County Council member and Gang of Four member Larry Gossett. At 7:50, we're going to have political consultant Michael Charles, who is one of the top young political consultants in the country, and he's going to be speaking to us about this election and what it means in District 3 and also the city. Victoria Beach tonight at 8:15, she'll come on with us to discuss her perspective as chair of the African American Community Council and a person who was against the council member. And Cindy, we have two guests in our studio who are dynamic leaders themselves. One a historical figure and a longtime member of the community who's done some really dynamic things. The Reverend Robert Jeffrey is here with us tonight.
This is truly amazing to be in the same room with Robert Jeffrey. Oh my goodness. For folks that don't know, you got to know this guy's history. He has been there for decades and decades and decades. Thank you for honoring us tonight with your presence.
Robert Jeffrey, the Reverend Robert Jeffrey, has also been a very, very visible supporter of Councilmember Sawant, and he'll speak to those issues in just a couple of minutes. And then David Horn, who is also with us, and he is a longtime activist, has served on Bob Ferguson's staff. I believe you were the chief of staff for Bob Ferguson, is that correct? Yes. So he's going to come, and he is against Councilmember Sawant, and he's going to share some of his thoughts and what went into that decision. So Cindy Laws, how did we get here?
Well, I think it's important to remember that what this is about, in order to qualify for a recall, getting on a recall, doing a recall is not easy. It's set in the state law, how it gets done. You have to prove malfeasance or misfeasance. You have to violate rules. You have to violate charters and things like that. And that's exactly what got us to where we are now. it's not what a lot of the people fighting the recall have claimed it to be. This was actually, there were initially six complaints filed, and 3 of them were made it all the way through. The first go through King County Superior Court, where each complaint is judged individually, and whether whether it meets the state requirement, and then from there it goes forward. It gets challenged often, every time. I think it gets challenged up to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court in this case ruled unanimously on 3 of those charges. And those 3 charges include, and perhaps Dave Horn can probably articulate this better than I, but the 3 charges include violations of city law and in one case, state law. So that's what got us here. And then to qualify, once you meet that burden, then you have to collect the signatures. And the signatures, the requirement was to get, they had to get a little over 10,000 signatures to qualify. And then because so many signatures end up being, in each case, whether you're collecting for initiative or a referendum, or in this case, a recall petition, you have to generally, from a campaign standpoint, you need to get a cushion of at least 20%, at least. And so that did take some time. There was a lot of problems with the signature gathering, a lot of allegations made. There were assaults done against petition gatherers, but they did eventually qualify for that, and then it goes on the ballot. Because the signatures did not go in on time, that led us to be the point where it did not make the November ballot. So the election had to be held somewhere between the November election, which was last month, and which a month ago today, and then it had to be before the next special election, which is in February. And so here we are. That's how we got here today.
It seemed this weekend there were a lot of folks out, especially if you were around Capitol Hill, heading towards the Seattle U community. You saw a lot of people out supporting Councilmember Sawant, and there had been some conversation about different ways that the ballots were going to be distributed and then also collected and so forth. How did the county go about getting the ballots out, and what are the costs and what are the challenges involved in a special election such as this?
So the special election, the cost of a special election is borne by the jurisdiction that holds it. So in this case, it costs the city of Seattle taxpayers to hold a special election. School boards, when they have school bond elections, for example, the school district holds those elections. Sound Transit has an election on their bond measures. If they're holding a special election, then they have to carry that burden of the whole cost. That's why a lot of times people want to have those things on a primary election or a general election, so that cost is spread out across there.
I'd like to invite Reverend Jeffrey to come up a little bit, and let's chat a little bit about Councilmember Kshama Sawant.
On October 23rd, we unveiled the new Converge Media Studios to Stephanie Johnson Tolliver of the Black Heritage Society of Washington State, who along with Damon Brown of Creative Lou designed our interview wall with epic images of Seattle's Black community of yesteryear from the late Al Smith's photography collection at Mohi. We often speak about our past, our community, our culture, our traditions. Though times have changed for us here in the Emerald City, Converge Media is firmly rooted in our history and grounded in our legacy while focused on the future. We want to say thank you to all of you who support Converge Media. Just know that you are the difference. You made this studio possible, and because of you, we continue to grow and thrive in our purpose. So be on the lookout for new, impactful, and educational programming from Converge Media. And remember, Black media matters.
Hey guys, Besa Gordon here, and before heading to Believe.
Welcome back to the election return show for District 3. Juan Cotto touching bases with you on our community radio station, your community radio station, Rainier Avenue Radio.world. And we were just going to get into the conversation about Councilmember Kshama Sawant and what seems like a meteoric rise. I mean, she came to our community, and I was just joking that you and I have been involved in politics so long and relatively short period of time. Councilmember Sawant came in. She was a software developer, decided to leave that career, started teaching at Seattle Central Community College, and then in a very, very surprising move, ran against Frank Chop. and to everyone's surprise, garnered 29% of the vote in that election, challenging the long time, at that time, Speaker of the House and a very, very powerful incumbent. Then 2 years later, she goes ahead and takes on another incumbent here in Seattle who had been in office for quite some time, a powerful city council member, Richard Conlon, and to everyone's surprise, defeated council member Conlon back in 2012.
I don't know that everybody was surprised. I think that it's important to remember that when a person has already served 2 terms and is running for another one, or may have served 3 terms, as it was in his case, and is running for a 4th, you become pretty vulnerable at that point. There's people start getting twitchy and itchy, and it was important to remember. You may recall there was the Seattle monorail, and Richard Conlon was the one city council member that was stalwart against the monorail, and so some of us were more willing to take a chance on Sawant, just to send a message to Conlon that no, the monorail had won in the city 4 times. So
4 years later, a young woman by the name of Pam Banks ended up taking on Kshama Sawant and had tremendous community support. The former Seattle, City of Seattle administrator, and also she was chair of the Metropolitan Urban League of Seattle, a person who really rebuilt that organization and a very, very strong candidate in her own right. And Councilmember Sawant was able to hold her off in that election. And what do you remember about that election?
Well, what I remember is that was when I think we started to really see the division between community organizer candidates and candidates that were supported by downtown. And so what you had was, for years, you'd always had these blocks where it was labor plus downtown business would be on one side or solidly behind the candidates that would win. And that was starting to fracture. And so with Pamela Banks, who, because of all of the great work that she did with the Urban League and building up their funding and stabilizing that organization so it could continue its historic legacy, so she had the business support. But what we started to see at that time was Seattle was growing by leaps and bounds. And there was a lot of people going, I'm not so sure I like this business stuff. I don't know that I like all this growth going on. Maybe we need somebody to arrest it and stop that and take care of the little people, take care of the people that aren't. And I think that helped bolster up folks. And it's also important to remember some of the other things that had been going on at that time around the United States. And so having someone who was a strident voice for the working people, the working class, that had really picked up some steam. And people were kind of enjoying some of the theater of the city council after years of seeing the city council, getting along and not having evident conflict. There was, frankly, a lot of people that really enjoyed the theater of the absurd that had begun to happen.
And theater it was. In her first term, her major piece of legislation was pushing the $15 an hour minimum tax rate, which at the time,
minimum wage.
Thank you, minimum wage, and that obviously was a controversial decision and one that received quite a bit of fanfare and conversation. Ultimately supported by most of the city council, and was pushed through.
I think it's important to remember, though, that this was an issue. $15 an hour thing was not initially her issue. This was a labor issue, and organized labor had been behind $15 an hour for some time. I'd say close to a decade at that point. And that was first, the campaign was first launched in the city of SeaTac. And that campaign, the work was done by Teamsters on the ground doing the signature gathering in the city of SeaTac. It was funded largely by SEIU, another large, powerful union. And they together were the ones that put there. Sawant was late into that race. But she took the bullhorn, as she so often does. She took the bullhorn and she started yelling into the bullhorn and grappled that issue away and wore the mantle of that issue, even though she was not the one actually doing the work. It's not the first time, and it's not the last time that she would do that. But once on the city council, she was pushing this argument so strongly that she threatened to do an initiative in the city. And then Mayor Ed Murray wanted to get ahead of her. And so in trying to help control how it was done, rather than do it by initiative, which is a blunt instrument, He wanted to have a broader coalition of people being involved. And if I recall, Reverend Jeffries, weren't you part of that coalition involved in that?
You're talking about the $15.
$15 an hour.
Yeah, I was part of that. I just want to speak to that. I think that the unions were involved in it, but unions were involved in it for some time. I mean, they've been trying to do this for years.
For years and years.
And I think that what Kshama brought to it was a community organizing spirit and begin to educate the community about it, because one of the miseducations on it was that people were going to lose jobs because corporations or small businesses were going to start firing people. This is the same kind of misinformation that's going on now. But she brought focus to the issue, and I think she deserves the credit. I think she deserves the credit for finally getting this through. I think there are a lot of things we have wanted in Seattle, but nobody was able to push it through. I think that, but she was able to do that.
What made her effective at pushing this through?
I think she understands issues that relate to people, common people, and she's able to organize those people and listen to their concerns and to mobilize those concerns and to put power behind it. And I think that she's a genius about that. I mean, she's really gifted. And I think it's a shame that a community organizer with the gifts that she has is being so maligned in the city.
Following the election with Pamela Banks, she goes into her second term, and another controversial stand that she took to start the head tax against large corporations in Seattle, and she was able to get that passed. And once again, you just said, grab the bull by the horns as the metaphor. She was able to get that through in the city council, and obviously that turned into a summer election where there was a threat of overturning it, and then it was repealed. But she certainly was making her mark as you go back to the spectacular theater that we saw politically here on the Seattle City Council.
Well, once again, this was not the first time we had a head tax. The city of Seattle had engaged in a head tax prior. That started, I believe it was in the late 90s. It wasn't very much. It was $25 a head. And that was actually repealed during a recession. And it's important, to remember this city has gone through several recessions, and we had a pretty darn big recession after 2001 with the 9/11 attacks. And that continued on. It took us until 2003 or 4 before we started booming once again. But the city council has been observant of the impacts on business in the past. And so that tax had been there before. This time it was about the pressure upon picking one company and beating up on one company repeatedly without recognizing the number of other companies that were impacted. While for every one Amazon, there's 1,000 other companies that were impacted by that original head tax. And that original head tax was really coming down hard on a lot of businesses that have a lot of employees and may have a high top line. Their revenue is high, but their net profit is not. And that includes grocery stores. And so what you had was grocery stores saying, wait a minute, we can't afford this kind of a head tax when we're running on margins that are, 1.5%, margin being your profit rate at the end of everything. And so, when it was actually SEIU and some other powerful people that got together and did some polling on this matter, when Amazon and other businesses were threatening to do a referendum on this. The polling was devastating, showing that absolutely the voters were not in favor of that. And so the city council didn't want to suffer a defeat at the ballot box. So rather than have the ballot box defeat, they repealed it themselves. And so that then led to I think it was 2 years later, with a more careful approach in how they were going to do that, and trying to exclude certain businesses that were not having just purely based on profit line, but to look at how much some of the employees were paid. And so that way you're taxing the businesses that have a lot of very highly paid employees, like Amazon.
Reverend Jeffrey, what are your thoughts on the issue that happened with the head tax? And also, does this once again show the effectiveness of her, as you said, her ability to galvanize around these issues?
Well, I think that what has happened around the head tax was misinformation. People believed that the people themselves would be taxed, and that tax would come out of their salaries and that sort of thing. That's the kind of way that thing was. The misinformation got out there. But I think that the approach that she took later was a better approach, and I think it was successful by talking about getting corporations to put money aside to deal with the problems of the inner city. The thing we have to understand is all of these things are not in and of themselves. What we're trying to find is mechanisms that can help alleviate the burden that's being carried by middle-class people and poor people in Seattle. I mean, they're being asked to carry a tremendous burden, and they're getting no help. And what Kshama is trying to do is come up with innovative ways. She's not trying to be troublesome or just a nuisance. She's trying to find innovative ways to give relief to these people who are losing their houses because of high rent, people who are being forced out of Central area. And you and I both know that's a real problem. I mean, African Americans have been literally driven out of the Central area by property taxes and by all kinds of shady subprime lending schemes and all kinds of things. We have to begin to try to resolve some of these issues, and because these people deserve, first of all, they deserve to be able to live in Seattle. They deserve to have a good cost of living. They deserve to have low-income housing that they can afford, and we have to build this housing. We have to build this stuff, and we have to finance this means by which we can help people who are suffering. I mean, this is if the largest Seattle has a problem in terms of income, or I think you said we went through a period of time in 2000, early 2000s, where the economic situation in Seattle was hurting. But just think about what that did to the poor. Think about what that did to the middle class, who are already being squeezed. She is that voice. People see her as this evil person. I see her as a person trying to find solutions to save lives, to help people. The tiny houses, all these things that she advocates for are things that will help people. These are not just things out there that she's advocating loudly for. These are things that are going to help people who are voiceless. Listen, they have no voice in some of this stuff, especially, for example, the tiny house situation, the situation at Chateau, right up the street from my congregation, where the developers were putting people out. They didn't even know they had the meeting. They were planning to put them out the next month, until Kshama knocked on their doors and told them what they were planning to do and organized them and stopped it. This may be different. It may look different. It may be frightening to people who want everything to be under control. But if everything is under control and people are suffering, then we need to find solutions for that suffering.
This is Juan Cotto on your community radio station, our community radio station, Rainier Avenue Radio .world, tonight telling the stories right within our own community, what some are calling the most important election in recent memory, the District 3 recall election of Councilmember Kshama Sawant. Very good to be here at the Converge Media Studios. To my left is Cindy Laws, longtime political activist, community activist, currently causing trouble down in the Rainier Beach area. And of course, one seat over from her is the legendary Reverend Robert Jeffrey, Black Dollar Days, the pastor of New Hope Baptist Church. And I'm going to check with my producers over here. Are we up against a break at we're going to take a break, and I believe when we come back, we're going to also hear from King County Council member Larry Gossett. So we'll go ahead and take a break, and we'll come back in a couple of minutes.
On October 23rd, we unveiled the new Converge Media Studios to Stephanie Johnson Tolliver of the Black Heritage Society of Washington State, who along with Damon Brown of Creative Lou designed our interview wall with epic images of Seattle's black community of yesteryear from the late Al Smith's photography collection at Mohi. We often speak about our past, our community, our culture, our traditions. Though times have changed for us here in the Emerald City, Converge Media is firmly rooted in our history and grounded in our legacy while focused on the future. We want to say thank you to all of you who support Converge Media. Just know that you are the difference. You made this studio possible, and because of you, we continue to grow and thrive in our purpose. So be on the lookout for new, impactful, and educational programming from Converge Media. And remember, Black media matters.
Hey guys, Basic Gordon here, and before heading to Belize, Trey Holiday and I had to make sure we linked up with our good friends over at Market Street Shoes to, of course, grab a few things for the trip. From bags to socks, shoes, sunglasses, earrings, and more. Before going on any trip, make sure you stop at Market Street Shoes. Trust me, you'll find just what you need to make your trip not only enjoyable, but fashionable.
I say to you, community, let's take up space. We weren't supposed to make it through the vast Atlantic or back to the door of no return. So shine like the gold in our skin and the first porch light ever lit, 'cause we lit and we stay lit. It is with love that everything we touch is ablaze with brilliance. We made jazz and had the blues so hard we're still nodding our heads, but this time we sampled What a Wonderful World. What a way to escape the pain and revel in joy. To the Marsha P. Johnsons who woke up our pride. To the Jimi Hendrix who burned his guitar. For the tennis-playing sisters, for those who didn't make it. And I promise not to fake it. We still want our 40 acres, a mule, and reparations. To the barbers and stylists who still carry on tradition. For the laughter through the tough times, the dead and the living that we hold sacred. To be a people who built empires out of sticks and stones and turned the names they called us into songs. We are still here.
Welcome back to the District 3 recall election show. And we are here with, to my left, Cindy Laws. And one seat over is the Reverend Robert Jeffrey, the legendary Reverend Robert Jeffrey of New Hope Baptist Church and Black Dollar Days and so many things that he's done in this community. And I am Juan Cotto, and I am a personality on your community radio station, our community radio station, Rainier Avenue Radio .world. We are here in the Converge Media Studios. On the marquee says Black Media Matters, and I just want to give shout out and kudos to my good friends Tony B and Omari Salisbury for their partnership. And we've seen in our community a lot of dysfunction at times with some of our Black media, but they have been able to work together and hopefully tell stories in our community in a very effective manner. So we thank them for their grace and getting along. And it's important that we have a community radio station so we can sit down and to discuss these matters in our community. And tonight, what people are calling the most important election in recent memory in local area here in Seattle,
And the first recall of a city council member in Seattle's history.
Reverend Jeffrey, and you have been a visible supporter of Kshama Sawant. I want to ask you this: in Minnesota, there was the police shooting of the back in June of 2018 of George Floyd. Set off issues around our country, set off a series of events that ultimately reached Seattle and created a crescendo here. And there was a lot of talk that certain elements of the community, including Councilmember Sawant, were trying to hijack this issue for themselves. And as a Black pastor, someone trying to represent the issues as you have over the years, what would you say to that? What would you say to the pessimist person who say that they were trying to use those issues to promote their own movement?
I want to first go back to what I was saying before, and then I'll
Absolutely.
deal with that. I was at a council meeting. This was before the incidents in Minnesota, when we were struggling and fighting for tiny houses to get people off of the street, get families, women and children out of their cars. And the council chambers were full. There was only one council person there, and that was Kshama Sawant, and it was her birthday. She was there for over 3 hours dealing with all of the issues, all of the concerns. I put that in there to just as an antidote to all of the stuff that's being said about her. Nobody really knew it was her birthday. Somebody told me before I was coming in that it was Kshama's birthday. She never announced it. She never mentioned it. I just think in terms of the Black Lives Matter, co-opting Black Lives Matter, one of the things about Black Lives Matter is that it is unco-optable because it is supposed to be decentralized, that there can be anybody who is concerned about the issue of Black lives can create a Black Lives Matter coalition. And I think that trying to take away the decentralization of Black Lives Matter is a problem for me, because you don't own that. The people who originated it say they don't own it. So why is it that I think I own it? I think that anybody who is concerned about Black lives and concerned about the issues that relate to Black lives is a legitimate leader in the Black Lives movement, Black Lives Matter movement. Kshama is a legitimate leader in the Black Lives Matter movement. She has African Americans with her. She doesn't necessarily have to listen to me. I mean, if she's dealing with Black issues and concerns in a legitimate way, if she's dealing with them in an illegitimate way, then I have a complaint. She's doing things that she shouldn't do for Black lives, then yeah. But if she's trying to get housing, if she's trying to get reform for the police, if she's trying to do things that are legitimately Black Lives Matter issues, then I think that's a false argument. And I think that's precisely what you were talking about before, that is going on here, that Tony and Omari are getting along. They have two separate visions, two separate entities, but they're getting along for the sake of the community. And I think that is, you have to understand that everybody fighting for Black Lives Matter is not for the Black community. There are people in the Black community basically who have their own self-interest, who have their own things that they want. And if they see that they can't get those things, that because somebody else is taking over that mantle, then they're going to obviously get upset, because to them, the end is not police reform. The end is that I be the reason, that I be the mouthpiece for police reform so that I can leverage my power And if that's what's going on, then that's against everything that we're trying to do in the community. We want change. We don't want individual community leaders to be leveraging their power so that they can get money and privilege while everybody else the problems are still persisting. That's what has happened in the past. That's what has been going on for years in this city, and that has to stop. Kshama is focused in on the problem. She's not trying to usurp anybody's power or authority. She's just dealing with the problems, and she's dealing with them, as far as I'm concerned, in a legitimate and authentic way.
Over the last several months, Reverend Jeffrey, as this campaign has gotten closer and closer, people have come to you because obviously you're a supporter. What are 3 things that you've told them, the reasons why you're supporting Councilmember Sawant?
Well, I'm supporting her because she's helping. She's actually bringing change. And I go back to the $15. I know that people say that she wasn't the only one, but I think it didn't change until she took that bullhorn. And, I know that people say being obnoxious sometimes is a bad thing in Seattle, because this is a city where everybody wants to look good, and they want you to disagree with a disagreeable face. But that's not always possible. I mean, when I came here, they called me the same thing they're calling Kshama. And, a lot of things happened to me. I won't go into all the things that has happened to me over the years I've been here, but I've been called like the old people say in the church, I've been called every name but a child of God. But still, agitation, that's what Dr. King did. He agitated, and nobody likes agitators. Nobody likes that kind of that profile, especially on the council. But I think that politicians have to become agitators in order to deal with what's going on in this country. We have to agitate for positive change in order to take back the country from conservatives who are depending on our passivity, depending on our niceness, while they put up Trumps and bullies to just take over the government and take over the democracy. We have to change our tactics. We have to change our ways. We can't be these nice, laid-back, polite people. We have to agitate for change, legitimate change that's going to, help bring this country back to its sanity. And I think Kshama is one of those people, that new breed of politician. And I think we just need to get used to it. It takes to get used to. Right now, everybody loves King because he's not here. But when he was here, they did not love him. When he came to Seattle, they didn't even let him preach in some of the churches. Some of the big mainline churches didn't even let him come in for the same reasons they're now talking about Kshama, because he is that agitator, that person with the big megaphone, that person who won't let you be comfortable as long as these problems are persisting. 2
organizations in our community that are certainly not agitators. Well, in a couple of ways they are agitating, because they are agitating how we get our information, and that is Omari Salisbury and Converge Media, Tony B and Rainier Avenue Radio. And we want to thank Converge Media for hosting this election returns show tonight, and as we discussed, and hosting it together on 2 Black media enterprises, Rainier Avenue Radio and Converge. I am Juan Cotto. I am the host of this recall election special. To my left is Cindy Laws, community activist, Politico, a dynamic community leader down in the Rainier Beach area, the Reverend Rofford Jeffrey. And we have Dave Horn sitting with us in the back, and we're going to bring him up in a few minutes. Do we want to go to break? I'm going to be talking to the producers directly. Do we want to go to break? And is Larry Gossett or Teresa on? Why don't we go to break, and then we'll bring on the former King County Council member, the Gang of 4 member, Larry Gossett. So we'll come back in about 3 minutes on your community radio station, RainierAvenueRadio.world.
On October 23rd, we unveiled the new Converge Media Studios to Stephanie Johnson Tolliver of the Black Heritage Society of Washington State, who along with Damon Brown of Creative Lou, designed our interview wall with epic images of Seattle's black community of yesteryear from the late Al Smith's photography collection at Mohi. We often speak about our past, our community, our culture, our traditions. Though times have changed for us here in the Emerald City, Converge Media is firmly rooted in our history and grounded in our legacy while focused on the future. We want to say thank you to all of you who support Converge Media. Just know that you are the difference. You made this studio possible, and because of you, we continue to grow and thrive in our purpose. So be on the lookout for new, impactful, and educational programming from Converge Media. And remember, Black media matters.
Hey guys, Basa Gordon here, and before heading to Belize, Trey Holiday and I had to make sure we linked up with our good friends over at Market Street Shoes to, of course, grab a few things for the trip. From bags to socks, shoes, sunglasses, earrings, and more. Before going on any trip, make sure you stop at Market Street Shoes. Trust me, you'll find just what you need to make your trip not only enjoyable, but fashionable.
I say to you, community, let's take up space. We weren't supposed to make it through the vast Atlantic or back to the door of no return. So shine like the gold in our skin and the first porch light ever lit, 'cause we lit and we stay lit. It is with love that everything we touch is ablaze with brilliance. We made jazz and had the blues so hard we're still nodding our heads, but this time we sampled What a Wonderful World. What a way to escape the pain and revel in joy. To the Marsha P. Johnsons who woke up our pride. To the Jimi Hendrix who burned his guitar. For the tennis-playing sisters, for those who didn't make it. And I promise not to fake it. We still want our 40 acres, a mule, and reparations. To the barbers and stylists who still carry on tradition. For the laughter through the tough times, the dead and the living that we hold sacred. To be a people who built empires out of sticks and stones and turned the names they called us into songs. We are still here.
Welcome back to the District 3 Sawant Recall Election Show on your community radio station, Rainier Avenue Radio.world, in Converge Media Studios. And this is the first time I've been here, and it's absolutely beautiful. Amari, you done good. And we're here tonight with a couple of guests here. To my left, Cindy Laws, community activist, Politico, Rainier Beach resident. So she's doing it down on the south side. And Dave Horn is here with us, and he's going to chime in with us a little bit. But we have a real special guest, I believe, on the show right now, the longtime King County Council member, the Gang of Four, the original Gang of Four here in the city of Seattle, Larry Gossett. Larry Gossett, welcome to Converge Media and Rainier Avenue Radio.
Thank you very much, Juan, and I really like being able to join your program this evening because the topic is the most relevant one for today, December 7th, and that is the recall, because folks, I think that voting is going to end in about 15 minutes. If there's any of you out there that have not voted and you have your ballot, zoom to a little community box like in the front of Garfield and put your ballot in. But this is a very, very important to our community, because as Reverend Jeffrey of New Hope Missionary Baptist Church has indicated to you all, there are no elected officials more consistent and effective in honing in on the problems that affect the Black and other minority and immigrant and working class communities of Seattle and the larger community here in Martin Luther King Jr. County. And I think it is very important that she is victorious in winning the first only effort to ever recall an already elected official in our county and in our narrow community. So I'm happy to be able to join you off, and I'm looking forward to Sawant, Kshama Sawant, winning the recall by having an announcement in a few minutes that a majority of the people in her district have voted to maintain her. The reason I am ending my remarks like that is because, one, I've been out with Reverend Jeffries and other supporters of hers over the last month, and I've talked to men and women who live in the 4 apartment buildings that she's currently organizing people around. That's Columbia Gardens, Cortland Apartments, Dakota, and Spokane. And hearing these people said that the reason I'm involved, the reason I'm inspired, because we have somebody that's actually an elected official that's coming down here and spending time with us and giving us confidence of what we can achieve if we get involved. And they have been involved. A couple of days ago, nearly 200 people showed up Saturday to walk the precincts in her district and trying to get people out. It's a rough battle because big corporations and Republicans and some confused and, in my opinion, misguided Democrats think that she causes too much trouble and she needs to go. What is that? Or she's arrogant or assertive. What's wrong with a South Asian woman being assertive, particularly if it's around issues that impact us? So, Juan, I'm very happy to be here. And I'm gonna let you get in some other speakers. And
no, it's unfair because with you, Councilmember Gossett, you answer the questions before I ask them.
Oh,
so,
yeah, I got some of my homies here in the audience with me at my pad. Okay, I'm sorry, I got ahead of myself.
Let's take a back. You're feeling very confident. Just in your comments just now, you're feeling very confident.
Yes, I think it because she's won the last 3 elections, all of which key pundits said she is not going to be able to win. She's a socialist. She's not from here, or she causes too much trouble, or she got last time they said she got Amazon putting in hundreds of thousands of dollars. So she is going to be defeated, and she overcame all those things. This recall is really unfortunate in my opinion, but she's organized against it, and with the help of the people, like I just mentioned, I'm confident that she'll overcome it. If not, she's going to continue to be involved in our community in meaningful ways.
Councilmember Gossett, so many of the adjectives at times that are used about Councilmember Sawant were also made at times directed towards you. I mean, folks who are sincerely passionate about the community, folks who use a variety of different means to get your point across. What do you think has made Councilmember Sawant so effective over the years?
I alluded to it just a few minutes ago. Her willingness to go to grassroots, everyday people, every day that is necessary to go to them. She goes into tent cities and talks to the homeless. And you know, folks don't like to do that. She goes down to I can't remember the place where people that were concerned about, King Street Station. We had a meeting down there about the bus costs being too high, and we wanted to sponsor a new lower cost for bus fare for the poor. And she was there, and then she gives confidence to the people, and then she's out there with them. Like Reverend Jeffrey said, it's unusual for elected officials to be out there every day. My cousin lives in one of those buildings. She said, dang, Larry, she's been down here 4 or 5 times, and her staff are down here every time we have a meeting. And they say things, I've never held a day that we will win. Nobody ever told me I will win. These are black people whose rent's going up.
Councilmember Gossett,
Yes.
You
Yeah.
touched on it, and I want to, and I've always enjoyed the intellectual conversations and that we've had about politics. Let me ask you this question: the term socialist, the term communist gets bandied about so much. Is that a fair label to place on Councilmember Kshama Sawant?
Well, yes, because she is in the Socialist Alliance, SA, or whatever they call it. There is nothing wrong with being, a socialist. I have been, when I ran the first couple of times, because I got my start in the Black Power movement, so I have frequently been described as a Black Powerite, as a socialist, as a communist. There are a lot of people in our society that do not know what those terms mean, so they just say it's evil. Actually, before I went into Vista and joined Volunteers in Service to America and went to New York City in 1966 to work a year in poor communities, I was scared of socialists. I was scared of Malcolm X when I lived in Harlem, and people thought I was crazy when I first got there. Why you have fear of socialism? Why do you have fear of Brother Malcolm? They just speaking the truth. But socialism is the opposite of capitalism. Very few people know what it means, Juan. So they just say it's evil because Russia, China, and Cuba governments are based on that. They could not articulate to you what that has meant for the people in any of those three countries. And they don't take time to understand that socialism is where the ownership of all the means of production, the machines, the land, the businesses are set in motion. They make money, they build things, and then how the fruits of the labor of those working is used is determined by representatives of the working class. And in America, under capitalism, people privately own the means of production, land, buildings, houses, and they individually, because they own it, make all decisions. Even if you like Amazon, you make all decisions about how his money is used, even though thousands of people, that 38,000 people in the greater Seattle area that he hires, produce this wealth for him. He's the only one that has something to say about it. Socialists believe that the people that do the work should have the major say on how the fruits of their labor is used. So I think people being called socialists, communists, Black Powerites, or whatever, Black nationalists, those are terms that they know it scares a lot of Americans that don't know what any of those terms mean, and they throw them out. But I don't see anything wrong with Kshama being one of the few, if not, and maybe the only socialist candidate west of the Mississippi in this country. And it's very difficult to win an election when you define yourself as a socialist and you're going door to door. She is unique in that she has been able to do it. And now she's the longest serving person, male or female, Black or white or Asian, on the city council. And she has earned the right to stay there. And I hope that that's proven tonight.
Councilmember Gossett, we have 3 minutes before we go to break. So I'm going to toss this last question at you. And thank you so much for being here. The Honorable Larry Gossett, King County Council member, a Seattle Gang of 4, former executive director at CAMP. Councilmember Gossett, let me ask you this. If Councilmember Sawant is able to survive this, as you are confident she will, what can we see in the next 3 years of her term?
Okay. Well, first of all, I need to tell you, I'm not on the King County Council anymore. Everywhere I go, people call me council member. I retired as of the end of 2019. But I'm going to continue to call you council member. Okay, that's all right. I'm definitely, as you can see, still going to be a servant of the people until I go to what my native brothers and sisters call the happy hunting grounds. I'm going to be trying to make this world better for people. If Kshama wins, she has 2 more years left on her before she has to run again for re-election, 23, I believe. I think this shouldn't be a surprise to anybody. She'll continue to identify issues that disproportionately affect and often hurt, if they don't get any attention, working class people, people that make, 60, 65,000 all the way down that don't make nothing. She'll see housing, economic issues, lack of food, railways going through neighborhoods or whatever it is, and she'll play a leadership role in trying to get some changes made, some reforms introduced that are helpful to the affected people in the neighborhood. And lastly, she'll involve them in the struggle like she's doing around getting affordable housing or rent control here in our community. Thank you.
One of the 100 most important, or one of the 100 most celebrated graduates of the University of Washington, King County Council member, former King County Council member, original Gang of Four member, Larry Gossett. Larry, thank you so much for taking time to spend with us on our community radio station, your community radio station, Rainier Avenue Radio. World and Converge Media. We appreciate it so much.
Yeah, give my regards to Tony B and all the rest. Thank you.
We sure will. Larry Gossett. Before we go to break on your community radio station, once again, we want to say this is Juan Cotto, Cindy Laws, Dave Horn, the Reverend Robert Jeffrey on the Sawant District 3 Recall Show. We'll be back. We're going to go to break for 3 minutes, and we may have some numbers when you come back.
On October 23rd, we unveiled the new Converge Media Studios to Stephanie Johnson Tolliver of the Black Heritage Society of Washington State, who along with Damon Brown of Creative Lou, designed our interview wall with epic images of Seattle's Black community of yesteryear from the late Al Smith's photography collection at Mohi. We often speak about our past, our community, our culture, our traditions. Though times have changed for us here in the Emerald City, Converge Media is firmly rooted in our history and grounded in our legacy while focused on the future. We want to say thank you to all of you who support Converge Media. Just know that you are the difference. You made this studio possible, and because of you, we continue to grow and thrive in our purpose. So be on the lookout for new, impactful, and educational programming from Converge Media. And remember, Black media matters.
Hey guys, Besa Gordon here, and before heading to Belize, Trey Holiday and I had to make sure we linked up with our good friends over at Market Street Shoes to, of course, grab a few things for the trip. From bags to socks, shoes, sunglasses, earrings, and more. Before going on any trip, make sure you stop at Market Street Shoes. Trust me, you'll find just what you need to make your trip not only enjoyable, but fashionable.
I say to you, community, let's take up space. We weren't supposed to make it through the vast Atlantic or back to the door of no return. So shine like the gold in our skin and the first porch light ever lit, 'cause we lit and we stay lit. It is with love that everything we touch is ablaze with brilliance. We made jazz and had the blues so hard we're still nodding our heads, but this time we sampled What a Wonderful World. What a way to escape the pain and revel in joy. To the Marsha P. Johnsons who woke up our pride. To the Jimi Hendrix who burned his guitar. For the tennis-playing sisters, for those who didn't make it. And I promise not to fake it. We still want our 40 acres, a mule, and reparations. To the barbers and stylists who still carry on tradition. For the laughter through the tough times, the dead and the living that we hold sacred. To be a people who built empires out of sticks and stones and turned the names they called us into songs. We are still here.
Good evening and welcome to your community radio station, our community radio station, Rainier Avenue Radio.world. Juan Cotto hosting the Kshama Sawant recall election, the District 3 recall election. And we're very close to getting some numbers from King County. And I want to invite Dave Horn into the conversation. Dave, you've heard two Sawant supporters clearly You have come out against the council member. Tell us what have you thought about what you've heard tonight?
Well, first of all, Juan, you invited me on here. You didn't tell me I'd be following Reverend Robert Jeffrey and Larry Gossett. I mean, you're going to owe me, I don't know, a really nice dinner.
I do.
I give Councilmember Sawant a lot of credit. She's run, I think, a pretty effective campaign. I think she's proven that she's good at getting elected. I think she has a decent chance of beating the recall. We'll find out more in a few minutes and as the week unfolds. Mike, first of all, I'm not a right-wing tool. I'm not not quite a billionaire. My 2007 Honda is parked down the block.
Only halfway there.
Only halfway there.
He says he's a decades-long public employee.
Well, yeah. So a couple of things. One is I've worked with and for a lot of elected officials. Many of them wonderful elected officials. Chris Gregoire, Bob Ferguson, and then with a lot of legislators. And you kind of develop a sense of who's effective and who's not. Who is all about getting in front of the cameras and who's all about accomplishing things behind the scenes. And, I think a good city council member is somebody who engages with the range of their constituents, not just the activists who agree with her, but with the business community and with people who may be in the middle, who gets up in the morning and takes a humility pill and goes out and works to solve the problems of the constituents that they represent. By those standards, I think Kshama Sawant is not a very good public official. She essentially works for the board of directors of the Socialist Alternative Party, which sits in New York City. They approve in advance her votes and her public statements. I'm glad to hear from these two community icons. I certainly can't question what they're saying, but I'm glad to hear from them that she engages with them. But it's like the tale of two Kshama Sawants. You get a very different view if you talk to people in the business community or even just people who want to approach her office about a problem. So I guess one of my issues with her is just the way that she functions. The other is I do think that she is too far left for District 3. She's a Marxist. She's not really like Bernie Sanders, although I think Bernie Sanders' endorsement of her has probably helped her. We'll find out soon how much it's helped her. Part of her party platform is that the government should seize Boeing and Amazon and Microsoft, and they should be run by the government. And I think that's, I think she's a little off the edge when it comes to that. And I think her perspective then is that anybody who criticizes her or who opposes her, for instance, on strategy, is a right-wing billionaire. And I will say, I have lots of friends. I would say most of them support the recall. All of them are liberal Democrats with histories as community activists and people fighting for civil rights and to make the world a better place. And I know a lot of them really resent the fundamental message of Sawant's campaign this year, which is you're either for me or you're for the billionaires.
Dave, was there an issue over the last 8 years that comes to mind where you said enough is enough?
I said enough is enough pretty early on. I will confess, I voted for Kshama Sawant.
Oh, so you voted for Councilmember Sawant in her first election?
I voted for her in her first election, largely because my neighbors and I were unhappy with Richard Conlon over a land use issue. Oh, we're getting numbers. Okay, sorry. Can we talk about numbers?
We'll go ahead and talk about numbers.
Since they're there.
Let's do numbers here. At 8:02 p.m., the early returns in from King County, and the number of votes looks like here. Well, here's the vote count. It is 32,129 total ballots counted. 32129. The number of votes yes, or the percentage is okay. Thank you. The percentage is 53%.
Yes.
Yes.
53% for the recall.
46% no. That's 53% yes, 43% no. The recall election numbers look like this at 8:02: 17,048 yes, 15,055 no. So right now, as in other elections that Councilmember Sawant has been in, the yes votes have the lead.
So this is going to be very interesting because one of the things is that there were 77,000 and change registered voters, 77,000 registered voters. According to King County elections today, the election turnout already as of this morning was higher than it was in the November election. So how many more ballots will be received in the mail? But at this point in time, with a margin of just 6.2%, yes, 6.2% yes margin, I would have to say that that will flip, and that Sawant will end up surviving the recall, unfortunately in my case, but that we have to remember that the races flip in Seattle, that the amount of late ballots that arrive are significant, and that we saw massive swings of 10 to 12, 14% even in some of her previous elections from where she was down on election night in, I think, all three of her campaigns prior, and then ended up winning by between 4, I think she won by 4% in the last election to survive with Egan and Ryan in that election. This time it looks like she will probably escape the recall by a small margin as well.
I figured to beat it tonight, she'd have to be at around 44-45%, and she's at almost 47%. Now that we'll see, because her history of improving by about 6 points, like Lorena Gonzalez did a month ago, improved by about 6 points, and most of the more progressive candidates did. That depends on a last-minute influx of votes from her supporters. And it wasn't really clear that that was materializing. The number of votes that came in yesterday was quite a bit smaller than it was the day before the election last time. So at least in the drop boxes at Garfield Community Center and Seattle Central. So I think it's going to end up being really close. I agree with Cindy that she'll probably beat the recall.
Well, enough from us gray hairs. Let's go to one of the bright young political consultants in our community. We lost him. We were just going to go to Michael Charles and get his interpretation of the numbers, but hopefully we will get him back as the numbers are starting to come in from King County. So once again, at 8:02 p.m., we have 53.1% for yes. We have a 46.9% no, and the recall votes are 17,048. 17,048 yes, 15,055 no. The total number of ballots collected at 8:02 that were reported on, 32,129.
So I think it's going to be one of the things that will be interesting to see is that one of the things we do know is that Sawant is an effective campaigner. I think that we can probably agree on. She's a very effective campaigner. She survives any number of things. But I would take great issue with how effective she has been as a city council member. If you count effectiveness as making noise about performative nonsense and standing up with a bullhorn all the time, she's been incredibly effective at that. Perhaps the one thing she's been most effective was in bullying her colleagues and in scaring them, threatening them, bullying on them from the dais of the city council chambers repeatedly, calling names, that kind of thing. That's bullying behavior that if that was done to staff, there would be firings would happen. But the voters have decided that this is not a firing offense. What they, as the esteemed colleagues that spoke before us, is that sometimes people may respect the need to have that kind of bullying behavior from the pulpit. We certainly saw that with President Trump, And I think that what we see with, in my opinion, what we see with Sawant is an emulating of the same behavior that Trump had in the same extreme tactics that he engaged in, is the same tactics that she and some of her more strident supporters engage in.
And I will say, I guess continuing on the theme that she ran an effective campaign, she had a clear, simple message from day one that this recall is pushed by the right wing, by Trump supporters, by billionaires, and it's a power grab by the 1%, is what one of her mailers said, quoting Bernie Sanders.
Which is crazy. You know,
well,
that Trump only got 9% of the vote.
I was going to say true that all 12 Republicans in District 3 probably voted for the recall. But the vast majority of supporters are liberal Democrats. And there are, I think, 3,500 people who contributed to the recall campaign.
It was substantially more than that.
Okay.
So more than 5,000 people contributed to her campaign. To the recall campaign. The number of contributors was 5,118 people contributed to that campaign, and the overwhelming majority of those people were from Seattle, and the majority were from the District 3. And that contrasts with Sawant's campaign, which had certainly more contributions of 10,896 contributions, and a majority of those were from out of state.
Yeah.
So that's again goes back to your point about the socialist alternative being based in New York City, where she's very, very strongly supported.
And my take on that is that the opposition, the pro recall campaign, talked about Kshama Sawant and the charges against her, and I never saw particularly, and I may have missed it, but I never saw a very effective message pushing back at the notion that proponents of the recall are a bunch of right-wing tools. And it wouldn't have been that hard. I did get one mailer, and if you had a magnifying glass, you could read the supporters of the recall, and there were a few unions listed on there. And I would have made that the headline: union support for recalling Sawant, because she's not an effective member. She doesn't engage with the rest of the council.
I can just see by the expression on Reverend Jeffrey's face, and he's looking at me like, "Why did you have Dave Horn go after me?" No. And we will give you a chance to come back up in a little bit. Dave and Cindy, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. This is the fourth time. Why is she able to garner support in this particular district?
Well, I think part of it is that when you're doing a recall, I think that where Sawant was effective in saying, and her supporters were very effective in saying, is that the recall isn't fair. She just won election 2 years ago, and I think the part with the recall campaign, the Vote Yes campaign, where it was trying to make the case that these 3 charges were violations of law, and it's holding somebody accountable for violating the law. But I don't know that the people, whether they actually understood what these violations were in the first place, but second, did they think that those violations were serious? In this city, we've clearly seen from the actions of the city council members themselves that violating the law is something that they don't really care about. The city doesn't enforce a whole lot of things right now. It's enforcement of the law seems to be on a case-by-case basis. We're going to completely ignore all these things, and we're going to let these issues just completely slide. We're not going to enforce all kinds of rules about parking and all kinds of other things, and camping and in areas that we've decided that that's not a problem for people to park on camp in school grounds and parks and things like that. So to try to make a big issue out of the fact that somebody used city resources, taxpayer resources, to campaign, it's hard. People are looking to be saying, I don't really care. That doesn't bother me. They don't care. The mayor going to the mayor's home, which is her address was protected since she was a federal prosecutor who prosecuted gang, mafia members and things like that, taking an army of people up to her personal residence and intimidating her and her neighbors, people didn't see a problem with going and protesting at an unpopular mayor's house. If had there been violence, it might have been a different case. But I think that people, the public, the voters, didn't necessarily see those as a serious enough charges to take such a drastic measure as to cast somebody out of office.
Yeah, and I don't. I would have more respect for her if she acknowledged that they marched to the mayor's house and defended the decision to march to the mayor's house. She was recently quoted saying, I didn't know that we were marching to the mayor's house.
Yeah,
well, everybody else in the march knew.
Everybody knew that.
They're wandering around in Windermere, which is a neighborhood that you don't just pass
Exactly.
through.
Exactly. Just be truthful. I think a little more honesty on her part would go a long way.
This is Juan Cotto on your community radio station, our community radio station, Rainier Avenue Radio.world, the District 3 recall election show. The recall election of Kshama Sawant, Seattle King County Council member, currently in her third term. The constituents in the 3rd district were able to garner the signatures, go through the process at the state, and get this on the ballot. And they did it on December 7th. There was a variety of different ideas in regards to whether that would be advantageous or not. Nevertheless, here we are tonight seeing the returns come in, and hopefully we'll have more numbers coming in. Dave, we have a new sheriff in town, so to speak. You were in the Attorney General's office down there with Bob Ferguson. We have a new city attorney in town. And Cindy was alluding to prosecuting crime, and some people felt that Pete Holmes was not strong enough. Here comes Ann Davidson, and she's going to be starting here on January 4th as this new city attorney. Will that have impact on some of these issues, and how do you think that office now will change under her leadership?
You know, it might have some impact. I think if her opponent had won, that would have had more impact, because her opponent was at least in the primary, promised to stop prosecuting misdemeanors, which is all the criminal division of the city attorney's office does. And so she effectively would have shut down the criminal division. I don't think there will be a dramatic move toward what people have called law and order. At least the city attorney will try to be holding people more accountable. But, you know, the prosecutors are sort of at the end of the pipeline. There have to be enough police to respond to the crime, to prioritize it, to investigate it. And we've lost hundreds of police officers in the last couple of years from the force in Seattle. And then prosecutors file charges, but they still have to go through the attorneys in her office, who are mostly career prosecutors who have a lot of integrity and won't file silly charges, and the judges in the court in Seattle, who are not advocates of locking them up and throwing away the keys. So it'll be interesting to see how she does. Certainly a change from Pete Holmes, and a big difference from what Davison's opponent would have done.
It is important to remember that the city council does hold the budget keys, and the funding of the city attorney's office we could certainly see the city attorney's office subjected to some of the gamesmanship that the city council had played with the police department in a way to exact retribution, to put some of their own skin and opinion on the game. If they perceive the prosecutor, the city attorney, going in too strong a direction, they could easily trim that budget, and it would be very challenging for to reverse that. The mayor only has so much control on that. He proposes the budget, city council adds and subtracts to it, and they can override a veto should they so desire. I think it's going to be interesting to see what's going to happen with the dynamic. Should she survive this, which it looks this moment like with just a 6.2% margin, that she's down right now by only 6.2%. Should she survive this, I think it's going to be interesting to watch what's going to happen on the council. We've got, one new council member now. We've lost another strident council member with Lorena Gonzalez leaving the council. But I think what we've seen is already since the November election last month is the two young men on the council who had flipped their own positions from when they campaigned just 2 years ago, and they moved far to the left with that big block of voters on that far left side. since that November election, they have certainly moved themselves back towards the center. So they're kind of like the swing votes right now. And so I'm speaking, of course, of Dan Strauss in District 6, and of Andrew Lewis in District 7. And so I think that these are young men moving up in a hurry. They've both had careers in public service before. They're very intelligent young men who have big, huge ambitions. And I think that they're going to be reading these tea leaves and try to figure out which direction that they're going to want to be going in the coming year and a half. The campaigns for city council are going to start up again in just a little bit less than a year. I think we can start to see people announcing probably next summer, because it does take a lot of time and effort to organize and get campaigns moving. And I think it's going to be interesting to see how things are going to, whether they're going to moderate at all, and whether people will be seeing how close this race is, and how much, whether that emboldens Sawant that she'll have survived a recall, whether she'll continue to be bullying her colleagues.
And if she does end up getting recalled, I don't think this is quite over. I do think there's a question is how much she'll come up. If she does get recalled, there will be city council races starting this week, I suspect.
Exactly.
And I just want to ask you both this question, and in regards to the numbers that we saw in the election. We talked to them before the show in District 3, and where Bruce Harrell won District 3 by a pretty substantial margin. It was a little bit more thinner than I'm thinking.
Votes.
So he won it by 500 votes. And then, of course, Nicole Thomas Kennedy, who was the opponent to Ann Davidson, won District 3, I understand.
By 14 points.
14 points.
I think with Bruce Harrell, it's really important to remember Bruce is really unique candidate, and a longtime city council member himself, having served for 12 years in city council. He's one of the very few people in Seattle, certainly elected officials. I think he's the only member of the city council who was born here. Oh, actually, I think Andrew Lewis was as well, but he was born here in Seattle. And I think his personal story resonated. His mom was in prison during World War II. And his grandfather came here from Jim Crow South for economic opportunity here. And I think that is a really important story that people resonate with. The fact that he went to Garfield, his dad went to Garfield, his son went to Garfield High School. And so that he had roots in the community and in the 3rd district that really helped support, even though he was, his opponent was trying to tag him as a conservative business candidate. That's not actually his reality. And I think a lot of people know that. With Ann Davidson, it's a completely different thing. I mean, Ann Davidson is a Republican. And I think the big scary Republican and trying to tar her with the Trump label had a lot of impact in the 3rd district, much more so than it did in other districts. And so I think that's a little bit different race to look at there. Certainly I did. I've got the maps right behind me here from the precinct maps on each race, each of the 4 races that were in Seattle, and examining those to try to look at the tea leaves on what is going to happen tonight in this particular outcome. But I think that this is, the 3rd is a very diverse district. It's changing. It's suffering economic, it's probably one of those, I think, other than my community down in Rainier Beach, where we're seeing the really big impacts of gentrification and certainly the economic challenges of having very, very wealthy neighborhoods. Get the Broadmoor's in the 3rd district. It's a gated community. Seattle's only gated community, and then you've got these very, very areas of extreme poverty and the tiny house villages and that type of thing. So I think that it's an area that it's really a good one to watch because it is so unique. Each district is unique, but I think the 3rd is most unique in that it kind of encompasses all of the problems of Seattle really impact in that neighborhood, in that district.
Numbers. If you love numbers, these two can give you numbers. But here's an important number for you. If you'd like to make a donation that will support community public radio, please consider there's spots where you can donate at Converge Media. There is our Venmo site on Rainier Avenue Radio.world. If you have the ability to make a contribution, you will support community public radio. You'll support your radio station, Rainier Avenue Radio.world and Converge Media. We are going to take a break, and when we come back, we will have Teresa Huey, who is a longtime community advocate and supporter. She is against Councilmember Sawant, and we'll get her take when we come back.
On October 23rd, we unveiled the new Converge Media Studios to Stephanie Johnson Tolliver of the Black Heritage Society of Washington State, who along with Damon Brown of Creative Lou designed our interview wall with epic images of Seattle's Black community of yesteryear from the late Al Smith's photography collection at Mohi. We often speak about our past, our community, our culture, our traditions. Though times have changed for us here in the Emerald City, Converge Media is firmly rooted in our history and grounded in our legacy while focused on the future. We want to say thank you to all of you who support Converge Media. Just know that you are the difference. You made this studio possible, and because of you, we continue to grow and thrive in our purpose. So be on the lookout for new, impactful, and educational programming from Converge Media. And remember, Black media matters.
Hey guys, Besa Gordon here, and before heading to Belize, Trey Holiday and I had to make sure we linked up with our good friends over at Market Street Shoes to, of course, grab a few things for the trip. From bags to socks, shoes, sunglasses, earrings, and more. Before going on any trip, make sure you stop at Market Street Shoes. Trust me, you'll find just what you need to make your trip not only enjoyable, but fashionable.
I say to you, community, let's take up space. We weren't supposed to make it through the vast Atlantic or back to the door of no return. So shine like the gold in our skin and the first porch light ever lit, 'cause we lit and we stay lit. It is with love that everything we touch is ablaze with brilliance. We made jazz and had the blues so hard we're still nodding our heads, but this time we sampled What a Wonderful World. What a way to escape the pain and revel in joy. To the Marsha P. Johnsons who woke up our pride. To the Jimi Hendrix who burned his guitar. For the tennis-playing sisters, for those who didn't make it. And I promise not to fake it. We still want our 40 acres, a mule, and reparations. To the barbers and stylists who still carry on tradition. For the laughter through the tough times, the dead and the living that we hold sacred. To be a people who built empires out of sticks and stones and turned the names they called us into songs. We are still here.
Good evening. Juan Cotto touching bases with you from the Converge Media Studios. On the dais in the back, Black media matters. Indeed, it does. I'm here with my good friend, Cindy Laws, Rainier Beach community activist, longtime Politico. She hasn't aged a day since I first met her. And the Reverend Robert Jeffrey, a longtime Seattle community activist, New Hope Baptist Church pastor, Black Dollar Days Task Force. Icon in our community. Incredible impact. I just want to pass on a note from Tony B. Rainier Avenue Radio is holding our first annual holiday party and bazaar on Saturday, December the 11th, this Saturday. From noon to 5, this bazaar will feature a wonderful selection of vendors with their handcrafted items and once-of-a-kind gift creations, desserts, resources, and more. Come get your holiday shopping off to a good start. Right here in the community, go to the Rainier Avenue Radio website and you'll be able to get more information on that event going on in our community this weekend. So if you haven't got those Christmas gifts, this is a good opportunity to get some really nice things. And Reverend Jeffrey, I just want to toss it back to you a little bit. We've heard from some folks that are against Councilmember Sawant. I just wanted to know what your thoughts are and how you would rebut some of those comments.
Well, I think that everybody, is speaking from their heart. But that indicates that there's a tale of two cities here. There are two things, two different cities here. We talk about the business community, but what about the African-American business community? The infrastructure of the Black business community is just zero almost. I mean, we have no stake in the business community. So when you talk about the business community, you're basically talking about the white business community. And when you look at the percentages, African-American businesses are less than 1 to 2%. So I don't know if it's that much. I haven't looked at the percentages lately. But so when you say business community, you're basically talking outside of people of color, African-American, especially African-American community. So my thing is that the interests of these two communities are dissimilar. I mean, we're not on the same page. And I think that if Kshama has done anything, she has amplified the fact that there are two things going on here. One is going on at the expense of the other. And basically we can see that in the demographics of how middle-class African-Americans have been pushed out because of the absences of businesses. If African-Americans had been allowed to have businesses in the central area, we could have held our ground when things started to change. But for 40 years, they were not allowed to have businesses because of redlining and because banks wouldn't give them money. And it's still going on. So she's in a way, a victim of dealing with problems that were here before she came. And because she's dealing with those problems, she's making a lot of people uncomfortable. But these problems are not going to go away if Kshama is not elected. They're going to still be here. And I guess what they want is for people to just be quiet and be silent. But that's not going to happen either. I mean, these problems are acute problems that have to be dealt with. Business infrastructure has to be rebuilt in the central area in Seattle for African-American community. I mean, we have suffered since 1960 when the city made a concerted decision to move us out of the central area. So she's calling attention to a lot of these things. Rent control. I mean, people can't afford to pay their rent. They're not making enough money to pay their rent, and landlords are raising rent. These are acute problems. Workers, we have to have workers in the city. Businesses have to have employees. Those employees have to drive in from Kent, Olympia. How far out are we going to drive them? How far are we going to push them? I mean, they're not making enough money to live in the city. So when we talk about, is she concerned about the city? She's not a good council person. You know, she's maybe not a good council person for big business who wants to just pretend that everything is okay. She's maybe not a good council person for outlaw police. Now, you know, let's talk about the police for a minute. For example, when you had the Rodney King gathering downtown, when I walked downtown, I'm a minister, I heard a policeman say, "Kill them all." I heard him say that. I'm walking downtown when I'm coming to a peaceful rally really sponsored by church people. And I hear bombs go, little, you know, those things that they throw that explode. Mm-hmm. Flashbangs going off. I mean, people weren't doing anything but gathering, and they're throwing flashbangs. They are trying to incite the people. Let's talk about, I want one more thing. This thing about her marching to the mayor's office. I was invited to that march. That was not Kshama's march.
You mean to the mayor's house? To
the mayor's house. I was invited to that march. We weren't told, they didn't tell me they were going to the mayor's house. They invited me to a rally and march. Nobody said anything about going to the mayor's house. And it was not Kshama. These were people who were concerned about Charlena Lyles. A lot of people don't remember Charlena Lyles, but she was a 98-pound young woman who had a mental health problem, who was shot and killed in front of her 3 children.
And she was pregnant.
And she was pregnant. We can make it even more dramatic.
I know, it
And she was
horrible.
pregnant. That was horrible. These policemen are still on the force, are still walking free. They didn't, nothing happened. Nothing happened to them. Her family wanted to, and others in the community, I don't want to say her family, but a group of people in the community wanted to do something about it. They called me. Just so happened I couldn't go, or I would probably be in jail for going by the mayor's house. They didn't say they were going by the mayor's house. They said we're going to march for Charlie and the Laos. They called Kshama. She went. It wasn't her march. These are the kinds of things that are going on, the misinformation campaign. And I think that we have to, if we're going to come together as a community, if we're ever going to have some kind of way in which we sit down and solve what are legitimate problems, we're going to have to stop with the misinformation campaigns and demonizing each other, because we're all trying to have a better Seattle.
If I can just ask just one question though, because this is what the opposing group would say, is that the mayor's address, because she was a former U.S. Marshal, is confidential. How did they get access to Jenny Durkin's address for that march?
Are you saying that Kshama gave it to him?
I'm
been
asking
the
you, but that's what.
That's
That's
an
been the
accusation, but that's not, did they have evidence on that? Was that ever proven?
Apparently there's a lot of speculation about that. But I think
what I'm saying, speculation is a
Right.
part of misinformation. That's
Well,
the
we
way.
can also talk about misinformation here as well, that comes from Sawant, and part of that is about you talk about the business community. This campaign wasn't about the business community. There are 53% of the voters in this district so far. Those are the voters that said no. They want to reject Sawant, and they voted in favor of the recall. 53%. That's a lot. And I think that is something, when we talk about coming together, that constant demonization of big business, when the majority now definitely downtown District 7 does generate, the businesses downtown generate something like 60% of all of the tax revenue in Seattle is generated in District 7. But we also have to look at all these other businesses that are small businesses. And you mentioned the Black businesses. I want to point out there's been a big series of stories in the last couple of days about what's going on in Little Saigon. And that's an example. This is a neighborhood that has been suffering greatly. And part of that is the result of people not paying attention, including Sawant, to this very important district. The International District, Chinatown, has been working for the last couple of years throughout the pandemic to try to stem the property crime, the violence, the shoplifting, the drug dealing, and all the other things that are happening in Chinatown International District. Little Saigon has not had the same level of attention paid, and finally they are. But what we're seeing is that I would call it, I actually posted on Facebook, I'm calling it my cynical Cindy's economic redlining that's going on right now. The city wants to develop this area of Little Saigon. So how best we do it? Let's completely ignore all of the crime. Let's completely continue to allow open air drug dealing and rampant theft and the breaking into businesses. These people that own these small businesses are giving up. They're saying, to hell with this. I'm going to open a business in Federal Way or Kent or somewhere else and move out of the city, leave Little Saigon, and then the people that own the property will not be able to pay their businesses, they won't be able to support their business anymore. And then out of the foreign investors that have had their eyes on those properties will be tearing down those buildings that are currently 2 stories, 1 story, 4 stories, and will get into the zoning that city council, led by Sawant, did to increase the upzoning in that area to the 10 to 12 stories that they hope to have. If that's not devastation to the minority communities, I don't know what is. And that's been a part where, while she says one thing, and yells into her bullhorn and yells at her colleagues on the council and calls them corporate sellouts or whatever she wants to call them tomorrow. What we're seeing is that when it actually comes time to putting in policies in place that do protect small businesses of all kinds, and particularly these minority small businesses, the minority small businesses that are down in the Rainier Valley and in my end of town, have been desperate for help for a long time now, and they haven't gotten it. They haven't gotten it from this particular council member who says that she speaks for them, but they can't get their phone calls returned. They can't get their emails returned because they don't matter to her.
And hey, I want to go to Victoria Beach, who is the chair of the African American Community Council. And if Teresa Huey is listening, I want to apologize to Teresa, and I hope she'll come back on and see if we can give her a couple of minutes to state her case. And I just thought the conversation was so good, I let some of the comments go. Victoria, how are you?
I'm good.
Welcome
Feeling
to Rainier Avenue.
hopeful.
Welcome to Rainier Avenue Radio and the District 3 election show. And I assume that you have seen the early return numbers. What do you think?
We're frozen.
I think that she's going to be recalled. I have the same feeling I had with the last election. The people that were able to vote in this recall, I think they're going to send a message. We're tired of it. We're not going to put up with her and her shenanigans, her mess. So I'm excited. She has to go.
Victoria, many people saw you on the Como 4 program that was done, I will say it was last winter, give or take a few months. And they saw you in your role, and you were interviewed and had a lot of things to say about the homeless situation and also about the police. And I just wondered if you could share some of your thoughts in regards to police protection for in District 3, specifically the perceptions of the police in the African American community.
I'm having a hard time hearing you. There's an echo. I heard you say something about a lot of people saw me on
the Como 4 documentary.
Yes.
Seattle's dying.
On the fight for Seattle.
Yes, on the fight for Seattle.
Even the one before that, Seattle is dying. Seattle is not dying. We're dead. And I think Sawant also has a huge part in that. I've gotten involved because I was born and raised here. There's 4 generations, and this is not the city I grew up in. And I'm going to fight to take it back with a lot of other people that were born and raised here, and even some that weren't. We've had enough. We want our city back, and we're not going to be bullied. We're not going to be bribed. We're not going to be forced into the mess that they're trying to serve us.
You've heard some of Reverend Jeffrey's comments tonight in support of Kshama Sawant. And as a person who has supported issues in the Black community, as chair of the African American Community Council, how do you feel about Kshama's support of issues in the Black community?
She has not supported the Black community, and the ones that are defending her and saying she is. I mean, she's I think they're being bribed. And show me what she has done for us. She hasn't done anything. What about all the young Black men and children that men and women that have been murdered? Has she ever come out and said anything? No. I hear constantly, if you email, call her, text her, whatever, she doesn't respond. She has her own agenda, and she hasn't done anything for us. I think it's a handful of the Black community that supports. And how dare her use that it's the racist. It has nothing to do with her race. I'm appalled that she would jump on our bandwagon to use to try to have voters sympathize with her. She broke the law. She's not above the law, and if we let her get away with it, there's going to be many more behind. So I don't think there's a huge support of the Black community. Maybe that church does, but from what I've seen, no.
You've been very diligent on this campaign and have been almost an evangelist against Councilmember Sawant for the last several months, and I'm just wondering if how optimistic are you feeling given the percentage of votes right now, considering that in the last couple of elections she's come back from it appears to be bigger margins as the elections went on through the week.
You know, she's cheated before, and everybody knows that she has. And I believe in my heart, if she wins this, she cheated some way. I have no doubt. You know, they're printing out ballots on the street. It's you know, they were in my neighborhood, set up on each quarter constantly. And I listened to some of the spills they gave a lot of these college students at Seattle U. Their main focus was, this is racist. She's for Black Lives Matters, and a lot of these woke kids fall for that. She cheated. We need to go back to citywide because there's no way she could win. We have to get our city under control, and it's starting with the last election, and now this. We have to get rid of her. She runs her campaign also in an aggressive way. Her followers are aggressive. It's I don't want her to have anything to do with the city that my grandparents, my parents, and my siblings have grown up in. She doesn't belong here. She's unfit to be on city council.
Well, we appreciate your comments tonight, and I want to thank you for coming in as we're starting to get towards the top of the hour and the end of the program. But I want to say thank you so much for taking the time, and thanks for your patience in being with us tonight. I know that we had you on at 8:15, and you held on, so I appreciate you coming back on. So thank you. Oh, I think Reverend Jeffrey would like to respond to one of your comments.
Yeah, well, not just one, but
Thank you.
especially one. I've been in the city for 35 years. I've never taken a bribe from anybody, and I've never been bought by anybody. I'm an independent thinker. I've gone against the money most of the time, and I couldn't get loans from the bank just to rebuild my church because I went against the moneyed interest. I've never held a job by the city. I've never got a penny from anybody in this city, a council person, anybody. Any money that we've gotten has been for the community, and it's been for community interests. To accuse me of being on the take for Sawant, I think is reprehensible. And to do that on some kind of live thing, that's reprehensible, and that's the kind of emotional misinformation that's going out.
You know, I'm not gonna argue back and forth, but I'm not gonna vote for somebody that's gonna just support me. I'm gonna vote for somebody that's gonna support my city, the community. It's not gonna just be because she supports me. You know what? I'm gonna go because I refuse to argue. We're all entitled to our opinion. Vote for whoever you want.
I agree.
But I can sleep at night. Okay, thank you. Goodbye.
I agree we're all entitled until we assault and insult each other, which I never do. And I try not to ever do. I try not to question anybody's motives. All of us have as I said, we have our opinions coming from different points of view. And, I think that one of this thing about, I'm not a resident of, I wasn't born in Seattle, but I love Seattle. This thing that they used to have on the plantation, the master used to tell the blacks that were on the plantation that any blacks that come into the plantation, if they weren't born here, then they don't then you have to control them. This is not about who was born here. We're all Americans. We move in any city we want to move in. We're all Americans. We deal with truth, and we deal with the realities, the political realities of the city we're in. We don't have to have been born there to love the city. I love Seattle. I want the best for Seattle. I want the best police department that we can get. I want the best city council that we can get. Just because we're on different sides don't mean we don't love the city. My children grew up here. I've got another child growing up here. I don't want to see him get killed on the street. I love the city. I want them protected. I'm for law and order, but I'm also for police accountability. And to be for police accountability doesn't mean I want anarchy. I don't want drugs sold on the corner. I don't want all of that, and I don't think Kshama wants that either. How do we get a responsible police force that will act responsibly to clean up this mess, instead of having a police force that has historically, not just my opinion, but in the opinion of the judicial department, in the opinion of the government, has historically abused their privilege and abused their rights, and have hurt and maimed a lot of people. How do we stop that? How do we get a responsible police department? And all of these things are involved, and I think Kshama is involved in that discussion. And maybe she's beating the drum loud, but we have to beat the drum loud because we have a lot of young people on the street right now who are being misused and hurt because we can't get this police thing right.
I think that one of the things that we're going to be looking at with some of the changes is having this new mayor, with having Bruce Harrell, who is African American and Japanese descent. Many people think he's Samoan because of his size. He's 6'4", was Rose Bowl MVP.
Hang on one second, Cindy. Hold your thought. We'll come back to
Okay.
community policing. We have Teresa Huey on the line, and she has waited so patiently. Miss Huey, how are you this evening?
I'm fine, Juan. How are you?
I'm doing very well. Thank you so much. And I am so sorry that we got you, but hey, we got you, and it's exciting to have you on. And thank you for taking the time. What are your thoughts? I'm sure that you may be following the numbers. We haven't seen any updated numbers, but I was just wondering what your thoughts are right now on the initial returns.
I'm hoping that the numbers for the recall increase, that we get a miracle of sorts, and that the recall goes through. And I can tell you why. First of all, I want to say you and Cindy are both doing a good job. Thanks to Converge and Rainier Radio. Reverend Jeffrey, Pastor Jeffrey, you know I love you, and I have a lot of respect for you.
I love you too.
I have a lot of respect for Larry Gossett. I worked under both of you, and with and under you. I worked under Larry because I was a King County employee, and I had to go out on L&I, but I'm retiring on my birthday in December. And Reverend Jeffrey, you know, I worked on Black Dollar Days, you know, and did many projects with my lady who's not here anymore, Lottie, for your church. But right now, I feel like there's one thing about activism and another thing about results. And all the work that I've done for you, Pastor Jeffrey, and for King County, Larry, you guys expected results. You know, there's no way as a King County employee, I could go out in the public and yell and scream and fight with other people. And the things that you said about the police, what we need, I have not seen any of the work that Sawant has done to move towards that goal. The goal was to stop Black men of people from being murdered. But it turned into a whole nother event with CHOP and everything else under Sawant. And I do agree that we need voices for the right things, but we also need results. We don't need a lot of chaos and confusion because of a trail of bad city council work, okay? She has not been effective for the city. And I'm more passionate about it for two reasons. My cousin was just murdered in Kent a month ago.
We're so sorry.
What did you say?
We're so sorry.
And thank you. And there's a lot of kids being murdered. Donita, her child was killed in CHOP because of the disagreement that the city council and the police had. And I'm very upset for the lack of respect and support for our Black police chief that this city council went after. They targeted her as a person. They targeted her with disrespect. They targeted her her pension for 28 years. And I expected to see more of the pastors and everything coming out for her. I would like to see the support for her that you guys are giving to Sawant. So if she wins, I would like for you to ask me, to tell me, what do you think that she should do better to clear up the divisiveness that she caused? You know, if that defund had it been worded and acted on differently, reimagining, where she didn't attack the whole police department and leave our city in chaos and confusion, and worked with Chief Best and the mayor, because the mayor was just as bad. I believe they both cornered a Black woman, caught her in the middle, didn't include her in the meetings, didn't support her. Her commanders under her didn't listen to her, and no one gave her that respect. I'm glad New York and other places are giving it to her. But what should, if she wins, if Sawant should win, what should she do better to bring our people together and work with our current mayor and stop what I call rant, support me with no results? What should she do better?
If Teresa, thank you for that response. And we have 4 minutes, so I'm going to give you 60 seconds. Just kind of share with us what you're hoping for, and let's say if Councilmember Sawant does make it through, but what are the things that you would hope to see out of Councilmember Sawant to help build that trust in the community?
I would like her to meet, her and the city council, to meet and listen to the people. I worked on the Orca project. We had to go out and have many public forums and listen. Don't just say I'm for you, and then we don't see where that action has gone. So I'm expecting them to come out, meet with the people. If I was them, I would have called me, because I've been talking about them for a long time. I would have engaged with me. I would have said, okay, what can we go to the community and say, what can we do better? I'm here to listen to you and do it. We all see what's going around in this city. It needs to be fixed. I'm tired of people saying it's her fault, his fault. No, her fault. No, she's not guilty. They are guilty. And as for the things she's actually being held accountable for, they are important. You don't take people in a city or county building. I worked on several security teams. You don't know where they're going to go. You don't know who's going to get hurt.
Ms. Huey?
Yes.
Ms. Huey, I have 2 minutes. I'm going to give Reverend Jeffrey 60 seconds to respond.
Okay, Teresa, I love you. You know I love you. I've got members who don't agree with me. I've got some people who've already expressed their disagreement. So I mean, this is about, you know, I have to be who I am, and you have to be who you are. And I think that people can disagree. I mean, that's what this democracy is all about. And I respect all people who opinion. I try to understand their opinion. I don't try to, you know, question their motives. I think you're right. I think that the Black community, if she wins, the Black community should come together with an agenda and bring it to her. And it's just not what I think. I think it's the community. What does the community want from its representative? What does this District 3 want from its representative? And I think that we should bring that to her, and I think that should be something she should deal with. I mean, there is a reason for the recall, and I think that people should bring those differences and bring those concerns.
Thank you, Reverend.
And I'll do all I can to help.
Thank you, Reverend Jefferson. Cindy Lodge, you have 30 seconds.
So I think what we need to do going forward is to do what we did here today. I think what we had today is some really remarkable people. I am honored to be here in the studio of Converge Media and to be here for Rainier Avenue Radio and to have these diverse opinions that are vigorous debates, but respectful. And that's what I would hope that we can have going forward should Councilmember Sawant retain her seat, that we could, perhaps you could counsel her personally on how respectful dialogue, not demagoguing people, but actually listening to people, not using suppositions and guesses on what people's motives are, but actually let's get together and let's do it together, because we've got to fix things.
She's never asked me to counsel her, so I don't know.
I recommend that you do. You're very good at it.
Thank you so much. We hope you enjoyed this program. We hope you were informed by this program. Araceli and Clemente, go to bed. Daddy will be home in a little bit. That should all bring it together because this is for the future of our city. Thank you so much, and we hope you enjoyed this presentation on your community radio station, our community radio stations, Rainier Avenue Radio.world and Converge Media. This is Juan Cotto touching bases with you for the last time tonight. We'll see you again shortly.
Converge Media produces culturally relevant content for Black and urban audiences. Our coverage is raw, transparent, and objective, praised by community leaders, government officials, and residents. Support Converge Media today via Venmo, Cash App, or PayPal at Converge Media.